I never thought moving to Meadowbrook Estates in suburban Connecticut would nearly cost someone their life. But here I am, sitting in a courtroom waiting to testify against the very people who were supposed to make our neighborhood better. My name is Nathan Morrison, and I have lived in this pristine community for 5 years with my wife, Victoria Lewis. We bought our house right after getting married, drawn in by the manicured lawns, the sense of community, and honestly, the low crime rate. What we did not realize was that our homeowners association, led by a woman named Patricia Henderson, would become the bane of our existence and eventually a danger to the entire neighborhood. It started last November. I remember the date exactly because it was the week before Thanksgiving. Victoria and I were hosting dinner for the first time, and I was outside raking leaves when Patricia came marching down our driveway with her clipboard. That damn clipboard. She never went anywhere without it. "Nathan, we need to talk about your mailbox," she said without so much as a hello. I looked at our mailbox. It was black, regulation height, and identical to every other mailbox on the street. "What about it?" "The post is faded. It needs repainting by the end of the month or you will receive a fine." I bit my tongue and nodded. This was typical Patricia behavior. She had been the HOA president for 3 years, and in that time, she had fined nearly every household in our development for something. My neighbor Tom got fined because his grass was a 1/4 inch too tall. The Johnsons down the street got fined for leaving their trash cans visible from the street on a non-collection day, even though collection had been delayed due to a holiday. But that day, Patricia had bigger news than my mailbox. "I am calling an emergency HOA meeting for tonight at 7, she announced. "Mandatory attendance. We have important winter preparations to discuss." Victoria groaned when I told her, "Can you go alone? I have that conference call with Singapore at 8. "I wish I could skip it entirely," I said. The meeting was held in the community center, a building our HOA fees helped maintain. About 40 homeowners showed up, which was roughly half the neighborhood. Patricia stood at the front with her usual crew. Brenda Mitchell, the secretary, who was equally insufferable, and Gerald Thompson, the treasurer, who mostly just nodded along with whatever Patricia wanted. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Patricia began, smoothing down her blonde bob that was definitely hiding gray roots. "As you know, winter is approaching and we need to discuss our snow removal policies." Here we go, I thought. Last winter had been mild, with only 2 significant snowfalls. The township had handled the main roads fine, and most of us just shoveled our own driveways. I have been researching, and I discovered that the salt used by municipal snow removal trucks is destroying our property values, Patricia continued. She clicked to a PowerPoint presentation that looked like it had been made in 1998. Salt causes corrosion to vehicles, damages landscaping, and creates unsightly white residue on our beautiful brick pavers. A few people nodded. I noticed that most of them were Patricia's friends. Therefore, the HOA board has drafted a new regulation that will ban salt trucks from entering Meadowbrook Estates during winter weather events. "Wait, what?" I spoke up before I could stop myself. "You cannot ban municipal services." Patricia fixed me with a cold stare. "Actually, Nathan, since our streets are private property maintained by the HOA, we absolutely can control what vehicles are permitted on them. We pay for our own road maintenance through our dues." This was technically true. Our development had private streets, which was one of the selling points. No through traffic, quieter neighborhood, all that. "But how will the streets get cleared?" asked Margaret Chen, who lived 2 houses down from us. "Homeowners will be responsible for clearing the street in front of their property, just as they clear their driveways," Brenda chimed in. We will also hire a private snow removal company that uses sand and environmentally friendly de-icing methods instead of salt. What if there is a big storm? Tom asked. Some of us do not have the equipment to clear street sections. Then you will need to acquire it or hire someone, Patricia said. This is about protecting our investments. Do you know what salt does to property values? I have documentation showing up to a 7% decrease in home values in communities that allow excessive salt use. I wanted to ask where this documentation came from, but I knew it would not matter. When Patricia made up her mind about something, that was it. The vote was called. Out of the 40 people present, 23 voted in favor, mostly because they did not think it would be a big deal or they trusted Patricia's judgment. 12 voted against, including me. 5 abstained, and just like that, salt trucks were banned from Meadowbrook Estates. The first snow came on December 8th. It was light, maybe 3 inches, and most of us were able to handle clearing our sections of street without much trouble. Victoria and I spent an hour shoveling, and while it was annoying, it was not terrible. See? Not so bad, Victoria said, her breath making clouds in the cold air. Wait until we get a real storm, I said. The real storm arrived on January 3rd. I woke up to my phone blaring a weather alert at 5 in the morning. Winter storm warning, 12 to 18 inches expected, high winds. Blizzard conditions. This is going to be a disaster, I told Victoria as we watched the news over coffee. By noon, we already had 6 inches on the ground, and it was coming down so hard you could barely see across the street. I tried to go out and shovel, but the snow was accumulating faster than I could clear it. The wind whipped the powder around, creating drifts that were knee-deep in some places. Around 3 in the afternoon, my phone rang. It was Tom. "Have you looked at the street?" he asked. I peered out the window. The road was completely buried. You could not even tell where the street ended and the lawns began. Yeah, it is pretty bad. I tried calling Patricia. She is not answering. The private company she hired. They service like 6 different developments. They said they cannot get to us until tomorrow at the earliest. Great. Just great. The snow finally stopped around 8 that evening. We had gotten 16 inches. The main roads were already being cleared by the township trucks. I could hear them in the distance, their yellow lights flashing through the darkness. But they stopped at the entrance to our development, just as Patricia had mandated. Victoria and I were watching a movie when we heard the sirens. At first I thought they were on the main road, but they got closer and then stopped. The flashing red and white lights reflected off our windows. "That is close," Victoria said, moving to look outside. I joined her. The ambulance was at the entrance to our development, about a quarter-mile from our house. We could see figures moving around it, but it was not coming in. "Why are they just sitting there?" Victoria asked. My phone buzzed. It was a text in the neighborhood group chat from Margaret. "Ambulance cannot get through. Streets not cleared. This is for Harold Chen." Harold was Margaret's father-in-law. He lived with them and had a heart condition. "Oh my God," Victoria said, reading over my shoulder. I was already pulling on my boots. "I am going out there." "Nathan, wait." "What are you going to do?" "I do not know, but we have to do something." I grabbed my shovel and ran out into the cold. Other neighbors were emerging too. Tom, the Johnsons, a guy named Kevin who lived on the corner. We all had the same idea, converging toward the entrance where the ambulance sat, its lights painting the snow red and blue. 2 paramedics stood next to the vehicle, talking to someone on a radio. One of them, a woman in her 30s, turned as we approached. "Are you folks from this neighborhood?" she asked. "Yes. We heard someone needs help," Tom said. "We have a cardiac emergency call, but we cannot get the rig down these streets. They are completely impassable." she explained. "We have called for a snowmobile unit, but they are coming from the county seat." "It could be 30 minutes or more. Can you walk in?" I asked. "With our equipment? It is too far and too deep. We would be exhausted before we got there, and we could not carry him back out." She looked frustrated. "We were told these were private streets not being serviced." Why would anyone ban snow removal during a winter storm? None of us had a good answer for that. "What address is it?" Kevin asked. 47 Maple Drive. "That is almost half a mile in," Tom said, "through all this snow." I was already dialing Patricia. It went to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. "Someone needs to get her out here," I said. "I know where she lives," Kevin said. 15 Birch Lane. We trudged through the deep snow toward Patricia's house, our small group growing as more neighbors joined. By the time we reached her front door, there were at least 15 of us. I pounded on the door. Lights were on inside, so I knew she was home. Patricia opened the door, wrapped in a bathrobe. "What on earth? Do you know what time it is?" "There is an ambulance that cannot get to Harold Chen because of your stupid salt truck ban," I said, not bothering to be polite. "He is having a heart attack." Her face went pale. "What? Why did they not just drive in?" "Because the streets are completely buried. Your private company has not shown up and will not be here until tomorrow." "Well, we can call the township, have them send a truck." "We do not have time for that," Tom said. "Even if they agreed to come in, which they might not after you specifically banned them, it would take too long." Patricia's husband appeared behind her. "Pat, just let the salt trucks in. Override the ban." "I cannot just override it. There are procedures." "A man is dying." Someone yelled from the back of the crowd. I pulled out my phone and called the non-emergency police line. "Yes, we have an emergency in Meadowbrook Estates. An ambulance cannot reach a cardiac patient because the HOA president banned snow removal trucks from our private streets. We need the township to send a plow immediately to clear a path." The dispatcher sounded confused, but said she would relay the message. 20 minutes passed. Harold's wife Margaret called me, sobbing. "The paramedics said they cannot wait much longer. They need to transport him to surgery. They are talking about trying to stretcher him out, but it is so far through the snow." I could hear Patricia on her phone, arguing with someone. "I understand, but this is an emergency." "Yes, I know what the contract says. Can you please just send someone?" The township plow arrived 35 minutes after the ambulance. I had never been so happy to see a truck with a yellow light in my life. The driver was clearly annoyed. "I was told I needed to clear private streets," he called out his window. "Yes, please. We have a medical emergency," I said. "Madam, you are going to need to give me written permission to enter since you banned us," he said, looking at Patricia. Yes, fine." "Whatever you need," Patricia said. "No, I mean actual written permission. Signed. My supervisor said your HOA sent a certified letter banning township vehicles. I need you to put in writing that I am allowed in or I could lose my job." This was insane. I could not believe we were standing around doing paperwork while Harold was dying. Patricia ran inside and came back with a hastily scribbled note on her HOA letterhead. The driver took a photo of it with his phone, sent it to someone, and then finally, started plowing. The ambulance followed behind the plow, and together they made their way to the Chen house. The rest of us followed on foot. By the time we got there, the paramedics were already inside. 10 minutes later, they emerged with Harold on a stretcher. He looked gray. Margaret was crying, holding his hand as they loaded him into the ambulance. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked the paramedic. "We are doing everything we can, madam. The hospital is ready for him." The ambulance pulled away, its siren wailing into the night. We all stood there in the street, breathing hard from the exertion, watching its lights disappear. Then, as one, we turned to look at Patricia. "This cannot happen again," Tom said, his voice hard. "It was an unfortunate situation," Patricia started. "But I want to remind everyone that salt still causes significant damage to our property." "Are you kidding me?" I could not believe what I was hearing. "A man almost died tonight, and that is terrible, but we cannot make policy decisions based on rare emergencies." "Rare?" "We live in Connecticut. We get multiple snowstorms every winter." Victoria appeared, having walked down from our house. She looked at Patricia with undisguised contempt. "You need to resign, tonight." "I will not be bullied into resigning by an angry mob," Patricia said. "If people have concerns, they can raise them at the next meeting according to proper procedures." "The next meeting is not until February," Brenda said, having appeared beside Patricia. "That is our scheduled quarterly meeting." "Then we will call an emergency meeting," I said. "Just like you did when you wanted to ban the salt trucks in the first place." Patricia's jaw tightened. "Emergency meetings can only be called by board members." "Actually," Kevin said, pulling out his phone, "I am looking at the HOA bylaws right now. Article 7, Section 3. Emergency meetings can be called by petition of 25% of homeowners. We have 85 homes in this development. That means we need 22 signatures." "I will sign," I said immediately. "Me too," Tom said. "Count us in," Victoria added. Within an hour, we had 43 signatures. People were angry. Patricia had no choice but to schedule an emergency meeting for 3 days later. Those 3 days were tense. The neighborhood Facebook group exploded with arguments. Patricia's supporters claimed we were overreacting, that the snow removal issue was just a logistics problem that could be solved without changing the policy. They posted articles about salt damage and environmental concerns, but more people posted about safety. About how it was insane to ban emergency vehicles. About how Harold Chen was still in the hospital recovering from emergency surgery, and the doctors had said the delay in getting to him had caused additional damage to his heart. Margaret posted a heartbreaking message thanking everyone who had helped, but also making it clear that her father-in-law would have permanent heart damage because of the delay. "He will never be the same." The doctors said if they had gotten to him even 15 minutes earlier, the outcome would have been much different. The meeting was packed. Every single homeowner showed up, plus some renters who were allowed to observe but not vote. The fire marshal almost shut us down for exceeding capacity, but we moved it outside to the parking lot despite the cold. Patricia stood on the community center steps with a microphone. She had clearly prepared a speech. "I want to start by saying that my thoughts and prayers are with the Chen family during this difficult time. What happened was a tragedy, and I take full responsibility for the coordination failures that led to the delay in emergency services." "Coordination failures," someone shouted. "You banned the plows." Patricia ignored the interruption. "However, I want to be clear that the snow removal policy itself is sound. What we need is better emergency protocols. I propose that we maintain the salt ban but create an exception process for medical emergencies." "How is that supposed to work?" Tom asked. "Harold was unconscious. He could not exactly file a waiver." "Emergency services would be able to request temporary access," Patricia explained. "We would have a hotline number. So in the middle of a heart attack, paramedics are supposed to call your hotline and wait for approval." Victoria's voice dripped with sarcasm. "It would be a quick process." "There is a quicker process," I said, standing up. "Let the damn salt trucks do their job. That is what our tax dollars pay for. That is what they are trained to do. Stop trying to micromanage municipal services because you are worried about property values." Applause erupted. Patricia's face flushed red. "If you would let me finish," she said coldly. The environmental impact of salt is well documented. We have a responsibility to our community and to the environment. We have a responsibility not to kill our neighbors. Margaret Chen stood up, her voice shaking with emotion. My father-in-law will never walk without assistance again. He had a major heart attack, and because your ambulance could not get to him in time, he suffered permanent damage. He was an active, healthy 72-year-old man who played golf twice a week. Now he cannot climb stairs. Do you understand what you have done? The crowd was silent. Patricia looked uncomfortable but did not back down. I understand you are upset, Margaret, and you have every right to be, but making emotional decisions in the heat of the moment is not good governance. Then let us vote, I said. Right now. All in favor of immediately repealing the salt truck ban and allowing full access to township snow removal services. Raise your hand. Hands shot up across the parking lot. Even some of Patricia's previous supporters raised their hands. Out of roughly 80 people present, at least 65 voted to repeal the ban. The measure passes, Kevin announced. He had taken on an unofficial parliamentarian role, his phone in hand with the bylaws pulled up. Patricia's expression was stony. Fine. The ban is repealed. Is there any other business? Yes, Tom said. I move for a vote of no confidence in the current HOA board. Seconded, I called out immediately. That is not how this works, Brenda protested. You cannot just vote people out between elections. Actually, you can, Kevin said, scrolling on his phone. Article 10, Section 1. Board members can be removed by a 2/3 majority vote of homeowners for cause. I would say nearly causing a man's death is cause. The vote was even more overwhelming. 72 people voted to remove Patricia, Brenda, and Gerald from their positions. Only 8 voted against, mostly their close friends. Patricia unplugged the microphone and stormed into the community center. Brenda followed her, crying. Gerald just looked relieved. What happens now? Someone asked. We need to elect an interim board until the regular elections in June, Kevin explained. Any nominations? Tom was nominated for president. Victoria was nominated for secretary. A woman named Sarah Martinez was nominated for treasurer. All 3 were elected quickly. Tom's first act as interim president was to send a formal letter to the township apologizing for the ban and requesting restoration of normal snow removal services. He also sent a personal letter to Margaret and Harold Chen, though no letter could undo the damage. I thought that was the end of it. The crisis was resolved, Patricia was out, and life could return to normal. But 2 weeks later, everything exploded again. I was at work when Victoria called me. Nathan, you need to come home. What is wrong? Are you okay? I am fine, but there are police at the community center. And an ambulance. It is Patricia. I left work immediately and drove home. When I got there, police cars and an ambulance were indeed parked outside the community center, along with a news van from the local station. Victoria met me on the street. Patricia tried to kill herself. Or at least that is what people are saying. What? When? About an hour ago. Someone found her in her car in the community center parking lot with the engine running. I felt sick. Is she okay? They took her to the hospital. I do not know any details. A police officer was interviewing people. I recognized him as Officer Daniels from the local department. He had been the one to coordinate the plow response during Harold's emergency. Did any of you have interactions with Patricia Henderson in the last few days? He asked our small group. Not since the meeting where she was removed from the board, Tom said. That was almost 2 weeks ago. Has anyone contacted her, threatened her? We all shook our heads. I mean, people were angry, I said, but I have not heard of anyone actually threatening her. Officer Daniels nodded and took notes. We are going to need to investigate this thoroughly. If Mrs. Henderson did attempt to harm herself, we need to understand if there were contributing factors related to the HOA situation. The news got worse. 2 days later, Patricia's husband Richard held a press conference on their front lawn. The same news crews that had covered Harold's story were there. "My wife is in the hospital recovering from a suicide attempt," Richard said, his voice tight with emotion. "She has been under tremendous stress since being removed from the HOA board. She received death threats. People vandalized our property. Our car was keyed. Someone threw a brick through our window with a note telling her she should have died instead of Harold Chen." I felt cold. I had not heard about any of this. The police are investigating these incidents as harassment and assault. My wife made mistakes, yes, but she did not deserve this. She is a good person who was trying to do what she thought was best for the community. The way she has been treated is unconscionable. The press ate it up. By that evening, the story had shifted. Now it was not about HOA overreach or the ambulance delay. It was about mob mentality and online harassment. Patricia was being portrayed as a victim. The police started interviewing everyone who had been vocal in opposing Patricia. That included me, Tom, Victoria, and about 20 others. Officer Daniels came to our house one evening with another detective. "We are investigating several incidents of harassment against Patricia Henderson," he explained. "We need to ask you some questions." "Of course," I said, letting them in. They asked about my whereabouts on specific dates. Had I sent any messages to Patricia? Had I encouraged anyone else to contact her? Did I know who might have vandalized her property? "I have not contacted her at all since the meeting," I said honestly. "I have been in the neighborhood Facebook group, and yeah, people have been critical of her decisions. But I have not seen anyone threaten her or encourage vandalism. If I had, I would have reported it." "What about your wife?" Victoria looked offended. "I have not contacted Patricia either. I think what she did was dangerous and stupid, but I would never threaten someone or damage their property." The interviews went on for days. The police seized the neighborhood Facebook group records, going through every post and comment. They also looked at Nextdoor, email chains, and text messages. Tom called me one morning, sounding stressed. "They took my computer. They have a warrant to search for evidence of harassment. Did you do anything?" "No, but I said some pretty harsh things in the Facebook group." Nothing threatening, but definitely angry. What if they twist that? The community was fracturing. Some people blamed Patricia for causing all this drama even after being removed. Others felt bad for her and thought we had gone too far. A few people were actively trying to rehabilitate her reputation, posting about all the good things she had done as HOA president. Then Margaret Chen posted a response that went viral. "I have been watching the news coverage with disbelief," she wrote. "Patricia Henderson is being portrayed as a victim, and I understand that mental health struggles are real and serious. But let us not forget that my father-in-law is a victim too. He is a real victim who suffered real, permanent harm because of her decision. He will never recover. He requires round-the-clock care now. Our lives have been destroyed. I am sorry that Patricia received threats and harassment. That is wrong, and whoever did those things should be held accountable. But facing consequences for dangerous decisions is not harassment. Being removed from a leadership position after nearly causing someone's death is not a punishment. It is accountability. I have not threatened Patricia. I have not vandalized her property. I have not contacted her at all. What I have done is tell the truth about what happened to my family. And I will not be silenced because the truth is uncomfortable." The post was shared thousands of times. The news coverage started to shift again, bringing the focus back to Harold's story. The police eventually identified the person who had vandalized Patricia's property. It was not anyone from our neighborhood at all. It was Patricia's own sister, who was apparently trying to drum up sympathy for her. The sister was arrested and charged with filing a false police report and property damage. The death threats turned out to be mostly from random internet trolls after the story went national, not from anyone in our community. The police determined that none of the neighborhood residents had done anything criminal, but the damage to our community was done. People were not talking to each other. Sides had been drawn. And Patricia, after being released from the hospital, filed a lawsuit. She sued the HOA, Tom, me, Victoria, Kevin, Margaret, and 15 other people for defamation, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She was seeking $5 million in damages. "This is insane," Victoria said when we were served with the papers. "We have to hire a lawyer. This is going to cost us thousands of dollars." We did hire a lawyer, a woman named Rebecca Torres who specialized in HOA disputes. She looked over the complaint and shook her head. "This is a slap suit," she explained. "Strategic lawsuit against public participation. She is suing you to punish you for speaking out against her. Connecticut has anti-slap statutes. We can get this dismissed, but it will take time." How much time? Months, probably. And yes, it will cost money. I charge $300 an hour, and I will need at least a $10,000 retainer to start. I felt like I was going to be sick. We did not have that kind of money just sitting around. "There is another option," Rebecca said. "You could countersue. Patricia's actions did cause real harm. Harold Chen has a very strong case for negligence. If he wanted to, he could sue her personally and the HOA. The liability would be significant." I called Margaret that night. "I do not want to push you to do anything you are not comfortable with," I said, "but our lawyer says Harold might have grounds to sue Patricia." Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "We have been thinking about it. The medical bills are enormous. Insurance is covering some of it, but not everything. And Harold needs full-time care now. I had to quit my job. We are drowning financially." "Talk to our lawyer," I said. "At least get her opinion." 2 weeks later, Harold and Margaret filed suit against Patricia Henderson personally for gross negligence and against the HOA for failing to maintain safe conditions. They were seeking $2 million in damages. The lawsuit changed everything. Patricia's lawyer apparently told her that she was going to lose badly if this went to trial. The fact that her sister had staged the vandalism destroyed her credibility. The fact that Harold had permanent, documented injuries from the delay made her negligence clear. Patricia dropped her lawsuit against all of us within a month. Then she and her husband quietly put their house up for sale, but she was not done making trouble. Before she moved out, she filed a complaint with the state about the HOA's governance, claiming that the vote to remove her had been improper, and that Tom was not a legitimate president. This triggered an investigation that cost the HOA thousands in legal fees to defend. The state eventually ruled that everything had been done properly, but it took 6 months. During that time, Tom had to deal with constant stress and scrutiny. He told me privately that he wished he had never agreed to be interim president. "I just wanted the streets to be safe," he said. I did not sign up for all this legal drama. Harold's lawsuit was settled out of court in August. The HOA's insurance covered most of the settlement, but Patricia had to pay $200,000 personally. Her homeowner's insurance would not cover it because it was deemed an intentional act rather than an accident. I heard through the neighborhood gossip chain that Patricia and Richard had to take out a second mortgage to pay the settlement. They sold their house at a loss because the market had cooled and they needed to move quickly. They left Meadowbrook Estates in September, almost a year after the snowstorm that started everything. The regular HOA elections were held in June as scheduled. Tom was elected president officially with an overwhelming majority. Victoria won secretary. The new board immediately passed new bylaws that included specific provisions about emergency access, snow removal, and limits on the president's authority to make unilateral decisions. We also changed our HOA management structure. Instead of having the board handle day-to-day operations, we hired a professional management company. It cost more in dues, but everyone agreed it was worth it to have people who actually knew what they were doing. Harold made slow progress in his recovery. He regained some mobility but would never be the same. Margaret started a part-time remote job that allowed her to care for him. The settlement money helped, but as she told me, no amount of money could give them back the life they had before. The neighborhood slowly healed. The Facebook group was disbanded and replaced with a more moderated platform. People started talking to each other again at neighborhood events. We had a community barbecue in July that felt almost normal, though there was an undercurrent of sadness about everything that had happened. I was sitting on my front porch one October evening, watching the leaves fall, when Victoria joined me with 2 beers. "Can you believe it has been almost a year?" she asked. "It feels like longer," I said. "Like that was a different lifetime. Do you regret it? Getting involved, I mean, fighting Patricia." I thought about it. The whole experience had been exhausting and expensive. We had spent almost $15,000 on legal fees that we would never get back. We had lost friends. The stress had taken a toll. "No," I said finally. "We did the right thing. If we had not fought back, Patricia would still be banning salt trucks and who knows what else. Someone else might have gotten hurt or worse, and she needed to be held accountable for what happened to Harold." "I keep thinking about how close it came," Victoria said quietly. "If that snowstorm had been even worse, if Harold had been 10 minutes farther from help, he might have died." All because Patricia cared more about property values than people's lives. "The scary thing is how many people supported her at first," I said. 23 people voted for that ban. They all thought it was a good idea. People do not think about worst-case scenarios until they happen. Everyone thinks emergencies happen to other people. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. The streets of Meadowbrook Estates looked peaceful in the fading light. You would never know the drama that had unfolded here. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Tom. "HOA meeting tomorrow night, just routine budget stuff, 7 p.m. I showed Victoria. She groaned. "Do we have to go?" "Probably should. It is our responsibility as homeowners." "When did we become the responsible ones?" She laughed. The next night, about 30 people showed up to the meeting. It was much smaller and calmer than the dramatic meetings of last winter. Tom went through the budget line by line. We discussed whether to repair the community center roof now or wait until spring. Someone complained about a neighbor's lawn decorations. Normal HOA stuff. At the end, Tom asked if there was any new business. Kevin raised his hand. "I just want to say thank you to everyone who stood up last year. I know it was hard and expensive and stressful. But we proved that homeowners can hold their HOA accountable. A lot of neighborhoods are not that lucky." There was a murmur of agreement. "I also want to propose that we create a memorial garden for Harold Chen," Kevin continued. "Not a literal memorial since he is still with us, thank God, but something to recognize what happened and remind future residents why we have the policies we have now. Maybe a bench with a plaque about the importance of safety over aesthetics." The motion passed unanimously. Harold and Margaret were invited to help design it. The memorial garden was completed in November, right before the first anniversary of the snowstorm. It was simple but meaningful. A curved bench overlooking the entrance to the neighborhood with a plaque that read, "In recognition of the importance of community safety, may we always prioritize people over property." Harold attended the dedication ceremony in his wheelchair, Margaret beside him. The whole neighborhood turned out despite the cold. Tom gave a short speech about learning from mistakes and building a better community. Harold struggled to his feet with Margaret's help and said a few words. "I do not remember much about that night," he said, his voice weak but clear. "But I remember waking up in the hospital and hearing about all of you fighting to get help to me, fighting to make things right. That means more to me than you will ever know. Thank you." There was not a dry eye in the crowd. That winter, we got another big snowstorm, 15 inches in one night. But this time, the township salt trucks came through without any issues. The streets were clear by morning. Life went on safely and normally the way it should. I thought about Patricia sometimes, wondering where she and Richard ended up. Part of me felt bad for her, despite everything. She had made terrible decisions, but I do not think she was an evil person. She was just someone who let power go to her head, who prioritized the wrong things, and who could not admit when she was wrong. The real villains in this story were not any one person, but the systems that allow HOAs to have so much unchecked power. The rules that let a handful of people make life or death decisions without oversight. The culture that values property values over human lives. Our neighborhood learned that lesson the hard way, and we made changes to ensure it would not happen again. We put term limits on board positions. We required board members to get liability insurance. We created emergency protocols that could not be overridden. We made it easier for homeowners to petition for meetings and votes. Other HOAs in Connecticut heard about our story and made similar changes. Some invited Tom to come speak about HOA governance and accountability. The state legislature even introduced a bill requiring HOAs to maintain emergency access at all times, though it got stuck in committee. 2 years after the snowstorm, Victoria and I were sitting in our living room going through the mail when I found an envelope with Harold and Margaret's return address. Inside was a holiday card with a photo of Harold standing with a walker, smiling at the camera. Margaret stood beside him, also smiling. The message inside read, "Thank you for being the kind of neighbors everyone deserves. Harold has been working hard in physical therapy and can now walk short distances with assistance. We are grateful every day for this community and for friends like you." I showed it to Victoria, who teared up. "We should frame this," she said. "Yeah, we should." That card sits on our mantle now, a reminder of why it matters to speak up and stand up for what is right, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. Meadowbrook Estates is a different place now than it was when Patricia ran things. It is not perfect. HOAs never are. People still complain about petty things. We still have to deal with rules about mailbox colors and lawn height. But there is a fundamental understanding now that some things matter more than others. Safety matters more than aesthetics. People matter more than property values. And accountability matters more than protecting those in power. Every time it snows, I watch the salt trucks drive through our neighborhood and feel grateful. Grateful that Harold survived. Grateful that our community found the strength to demand change. Grateful that we learned these lessons without an even worse tragedy. And every time I drive past that memorial bench with its simple plaque, I am reminded that good governance is not about control or perfection. It is about serving the community, admitting mistakes, and always putting people first. That is the lesson Patricia Henderson never learned. But the rest of us did, and our neighborhood is better for it. We paid a high price for that education. Harold paid the highest price of all with his health and his quality of life. But out of that terrible situation came real change. Tom served 2 full terms as HOA president before stepping down voluntarily, saying he wanted to make sure we did not end up with another entrenched leader who could not be removed. His successor is a retired schoolteacher named Jennifer who runs meetings with fairness and common sense. The HOA actually functions well now. We maintain the properties, we enforce reasonable rules, and we do it all with transparency and homeowner input. It is boring, which is exactly what an HOA should be. I still live in Meadowbrook Estates with Victoria. We thought about moving after everything that happened, but ultimately we decided to stay. This is our home, and we fought to make it better. Why would we leave now? Besides, Harold and Margaret are still here too. Harold's health has stabilized, and while he will never fully recover, he has adapted to his limitations. He sits on his front porch on nice days, waving to neighbors as they pass. Sometimes I stop and chat with him about sports or the weather or whatever is on his mind. He never expresses bitterness about what happened to him. When I asked him once how he could be so forgiving, he said something that stuck with me. Being angry would not give me my health back, he said. And honestly, I think Patricia has suffered more than I have in some ways. I have this wonderful community that rallied around me. I have my family. I have purpose in my life. What does Patricia have? She lost her home, her reputation, her role in the community. She is probably still paying off that settlement. In the end, her own stubbornness destroyed her life more than it destroyed mine. That perspective amazed me. Here was a man who had lost so much, and he could still have empathy for the person who caused it. Last I heard, Patricia and Richard were living in a condo in Florida. Someone from the old neighborhood saw them at a grocery store when they were visiting family. Patricia apparently looked older and sadder. She did not want to talk about Connecticut or what happened. Richard told them they were doing fine, but it was clear they were not. I do not take pleasure in that. I wanted accountability, not revenge. But actions have consequences, and Patricia's actions had serious consequences for a lot of people, including herself. The story of what happened in Meadowbrook Estates became something of a cautionary tale in HOA circles. Articles were written about it in community management magazines. It was discussed in HOA board training sessions as an example of what not to do. Our neighborhood became famous for all the wrong reasons, but we also became an example of what homeowners can do when they organize and demand change. We proved that HOA boards can be held accountable, that dangerous policies can be overturned, and that communities can heal from conflict. None of it was easy. All of it was worth it. As I write this, it is coming up on the 5th anniversary of that snowstorm. The memorial garden has mature plants now, and the bench has weathered to a nice patina. People use it regularly, sitting there to enjoy the view or wait for rides or just take a moment of peace. Most of the newer residents do not know the full story of why that bench is there. They see the plaque about community safety, but do not know about the ambulance stuck at the entrance, the frantic shoveling in the dark, or the man who nearly died because someone valued salt-free pavers more than human life. Maybe that is okay. Maybe every generation has to learn these lessons for themselves, but I hope that bench and that plaque serve as a quiet reminder. The rules we make matter. The leaders we choose matter. And sometimes, standing up for what is right requires more courage than we think we have. I found that courage because I had to. Because Harold needed help, and someone had to demand that help be allowed through. Because Patricia needed to be stopped before she hurt someone else. because my community deserved better leadership. Looking back, I do not see myself as brave. I see myself as someone who was in the right place at the right time with the right combination of anger and determination. But maybe that is all bravery ever is. Regular people deciding that something matters enough to fight for. The streets of Meadowbrook Estates are safe now. Emergency vehicles can access every home without barriers. Salt trucks come through whenever needed. And when it snows, I sleep peacefully knowing that if anyone needs help, that help will be able to reach them. That is all I ever wanted. That is all any of us should want from the places we live. Safety. Sanity. A community that values people over rules. We have that now. It cost us dearly, but we have it, and I will never take it for granted again.